Hello, so today, to continue our set 15 PvE content, I want to talk a little bit about the new traits coming to set 15. What I want to do is I want to rank them by how interesting or exciting I think they are. So that's right, we're doing another tier list. Yippee! A lot of people like the tier list. This one's going to be very similar to the previous one that I did. I ranked the units by how cool or exciting I think they are. Because right now, you know, it's PvE, things are rapidly changing, units that are strong become units that are weak, and vice versa. So I don't want to rank stuff by like power or anything like that. Instead, I just want to look at the traits and kind of talk a little bit about them, like how they exist in the past. Are they very similar to past traits? Are they new, novel, interesting, exciting? How much do I want to explore them and play around the units, etc. And at the same time, I can also introduce the traits and the units for those of you that are keeping up. If you like my content, make sure to like and subscribe because it does help me out as a smaller TFT content creator. We're working on our 10,000 sub goal. If we hit 10,000 subs, I'll do an RP giveaway, so that's something you can look forward to as well. Normally, I'm doing guide style content, so you know, sometimes it's for fun stuff like these tier lists and other things, but in general, they're going to be more guide focused. It's just when the set comes out, you know, all the how to play guides and the itemization guides and those type of things. We're going to wait till like the final balance and the first couple of patches happen, and then it's going to be full steam ahead daily guides for you guys. Before we get started, also, I want to say, I baked a bread today with my mom, and it came out pretty good. So I want to just show you guys, because, like, I showed it to my friends as well. But I'm showing it to everybody, because, look, it looks so good. I'm waiting for it to finish, like, cooling so I can eat it. I'm going to try and make a sandwich later. But anyways, that's why we're doing a tier list today, because I didn't have time to work on a guide, because I was making bread today. But anyways, I digress. Let's start. Battle Academia. So, Battle Academia, I'm going to put it kind of like, it's hard to say where I want to rank it, because a lot of Battle Academia, I have a little bit of bias towards the previous set. So if I'm going to put in B tier to start, right? Battle Academia, basically the way that it works is that you get these extra potentials that you that basically scale up. So as you play more Battle Academia units, you get more potential and unlocks like more power for each of the units, like better abilities or like extra scaling. The problem that I have with this is that I was really excited about AMP last set. So last set there was AMP, and I thought it was really cool and new. At least I haven't seen an iteration like that in a long time that kind of played around like an extra resource that kind of can scale all your units to make them really powerful. But I felt like AMP last set, so this is set 14 that I'm talking about, didn't really fall into a place where I enjoyed it a lot. It felt like, you know, it was kind of like and then like it was like over buffed, and then it became like a very like play 5 amp or don't play 5 amp. So, you know, normally when I look at these things, I think they're pretty cool and exciting. I'd usually put an A tier, but I'm just a little bit like, you know, I don't know where Battle Academia is going to fall, and I kind of hope that it doesn't just turn into always play 7 Battle Academia style of board. I would like it to have like more variance, at least different to how AMP kind of behaved in the last set. So I'm kind of putting in B tier because, like I said, mostly because of bias of the previous set, it just kind of tempered my expectations a little bit. Now, you know, if you're somebody who really enjoys it or thinks it's really cool, by all means, it can be higher. I'm just saying, for me personally, I'm not like looking to play it instantly, like super excited. Crystal Gambit, I put in A tier. So it's not because it's a new and exciting thing. This is actually very similar to Heartsteel. It's basically a dedicated loss streak thing where you lose multiple rounds and then you get like a big cash out. I think it's actually really cool. I like the way that like 7 Crystal Gambit becomes like a Crystal Gambit carry kind of board, and I like how like 3 and 5 has like this extra little extra stuff, which is kind of cool. I'm curious about 5 Crystal Gambit and like, you know, playing around like win streak with it and stuff like that. There's a couple interesting aspects of it, like exactly how to time like a really good cash out. I think it's just interesting and cool. I like this mechanic. I think Heartsteel is one of the best loss streak traits that existed in TFT. So having something very similar to it is something that I think is a positive because I really like it. If you want to see what I'm talking about, by the way, Heartsteel, it's in the set revival. So you can actually play the set 10 set revival if you've never played set 10. And there's a trait that's very similar to this one in that one. Luchador I put as S tier. So Luchador, I'm super excited about this one. You might have heard me talk about it a lot in some of the previous videos that I was doing, but I started in set 9. In set 9, one of the big mechanics in set 9, not mechanics, but one of the big aspects of set 9 was playing around 2 units, right? Jarvan, who was like an insanely strong stun, and playing around Sejuani with Freylord. The Freylord trait basically provided a board-wide stun, and you would have stun by means of Jarvan or Freylord, and a lot of times when you would play flexibly, you would try and fit in one or the other. You would either try and play towards Freylord, or you would try and play towards having Jarvan on your board, board to make sure that your board had a stun to keep up with everybody else. There's also like craftable Zephyr that set, so there's like all sorts of like interruptions, so you have to be on your toes. Every single fight positioning matter. There's all sorts of crazy stuff. I see Luchador as having like an easy access to stun that could apply itself very easily to many boards because it's only a 2 trait. There's also the 4 trait, but I'm not looking at it to play like Luchador carries, more of if it can like easily splash itself into boards. Now obviously that might not be the case, and there might be other reasons, but I like the idea of having a trait that you can play around, that you can easily slot in, to give you like a very powerful benefit, right? The stun, for example, by getting from any of these Luchador units can easily sway a fight. So you have this high cap potential, even if you're not playing towards Luchadors, to find a way to slot it in on a level 9 or play around it to like give you that extra juice. And then if you don't play Luchador, there's also Jarvan that you can maybe slot in. I'm hoping that it allows for some sort of flex play that was similar in set 9. And that's what gives me like that sense of like, oh boy, this is really exciting. Not something that's completely new or crazy, but something that I'm hoping kind of like tickles that itch that I've had, because like, you know, I've never really recreated the joy I had around building boards in set 9, because a lot of the boards after that, TFT kind of, maybe it wasn't set 9, it might just be because it was the first set that I played, but it felt really like a lot of the way that like things were balanced kind of went in a different route than I enjoyed. And recently it actually went back towards like something I enjoy. I felt like set 13, even set 14, right? I didn't play that much, but I feel like the balance and the way you can construct the boards typically kind of felt a little bit better, at least compared to some of the previous sets like 12 and 11 for me. So, you know, stuff like that, but that's what I look forward to. Mentor, I'm putting in A tier. It's like a little bit of a spin on Emissary, which was a really cool thing that they added in set 13. But basically you have a 1 or a 4 trait. But here, basically the 1 trait activates one of the Mentor bonuses, which is cool. You just try and slot them in if they fit onto your board, get a team-wide bonus. That's always cool. I love traits like that. 4 Mentor is actually kind of interesting because the Mentors gain all the bonuses and they upgrade their abilities, but everybody else gets nothing. So basically you play 4 Mentor is not like in the past where you would play 4 Emissary, for example, and your whole board would get a bunch of buffs and you would play some sort of like crazy Emissary flex that was really powerful. Here, there's like Mentor flex where you play these 4 Mentor units and then you find some other 4 units that share some sort of synergy or abilities to help out your board. Like Mentor with Mighty Mech works really well because you just get the extra front line and you have like inter-team synergies that work nicely there. But in general, I think it's pretty cool because you're basically making this 4-piece package where all of these units get really powerful. Like Udyr has anti-heal, Rise just pumps out damage. So like, you know, right now it seems like a little bit overtuned in PvE, but I would like to see it in like a more balanced state, such that like, you know, you're just playing around these 4 units. And then you have like, you know, all these open slots. So you can kind of find a way to construct a separate board and have like a little bit of a flex, like a cool building blocks. That's what I see with the Mentor. It's like a cool self-sustaining building block that has access to different utility aspects, while also giving a lot of stats to themselves, which seems pretty cool. Mighty Mech to me just seems like the similar to, like, I think it's cool because of how it looks. I like the whole like, you know, Common Rider aesthetic. Well, I know Common Rider is in mechs, like it's more like Power Rangers, but like come on, like every single one of these characters looks like Kiva. You know what I mean? Like, where are my Common Rider heads at? You know what I mean? Like, but anyways, I digress. What's it called? I think it looks cool because I love those kind of shows. Like, I grew up with all of them, right? But it's like, you know, it just feels like the summon trait, so it's very average. It's kind of just like, this is a trait that exists and has existed before. I think it's a nice B tier. Monster Trainer I think is cool and new. I actually like Monster Trainer a lot. I want to put an S tier. I'm not sure exactly how it's gonna pan out, but each of the, basically you have a Lulu, she summons a monster and then they level up. It's kind of like its own little scaling mini game. Right now, so far I tried it in PvE. It doesn't seem super broken. Like, it's not like a hard force type of thing. And it seems to level up pretty slow. Like, you never really hit it at like a early tempo and just like really aggressive and win out kind of comp. It's like a very like basic kind of reroll, it feels like. But I just think it's like a cool mechanic. I love that it's like a separate game within the game, kind of. And it makes the unit really unique. And the thing is that the 3 summons that you get for Monster Trainer, they all have pretty good utility, right? Rammus is like a frontline stun bot. Smolder is like an anti-heal backline damage dealer, and Kog'Maw is kind of like similar to like previous iterations of Kog'Maw, where he just does a bunch of damage, like ramping with attack speed, but he also does 30% shred and sunder, which is a lot, because 30%, usually units only give 20% shred sunder, and then you have to rely on items to get 30% to optimize. But here, out of the box, Kog'Maw does 30%. Like, if that doesn't change, that's actually really cool utility that you can put at all stages of the game, and maybe even make a late game board where you have a Kog'Maw just to apply that utility if you don't have it. So I think that's really cool, and you can also switch between them. So let's say you need Kog'Maw early, then you get Shred. You can even switch to like a Rammus. Now, the level scaling doesn't alternate, right? It doesn't switch between the units, right? If you level up a Kog'Maw, it doesn't level up the Rammus, but still cool, right? I think it's still a cool idea, and it's a cool concept that I feel like is unique to this set, which is something that's really nice. Next we have Rogue Captain. This one is just like, you know, shits out loot and stuff. I don't see it as super crazy, so I'm just gonna put in B tier. It feels like similar to a lot of the other ones that, you know, you have a 5 cost that just gives you loot. It's similar to like what I've seen before, but it doesn't do anything super interesting about it. Just like at the end of the round, just gives you some loot. It's like, okay. You know, like, at least, like, when you played, like, you know, in set 11 Lysandra, at least you put them in a teapot. You know, it was dope. But, you know, it is what it is. Rosemother, pretty much similar to a lot of the other sets. I think a 5 cost, just, like, summon extra plants, right? And then benefits from abilities. Benefits from her, like, stats, like ability power and attack speed. So, you know, I'm kind of like, yeah, kind of run-of-the-mill. Pretty alright. Next we have, Soul Fighter. So Soul Fighter, I think it's kind of B tier. It feels like the generic vertical trait, right? Get a bunch of different stats, right? AP, AD, HP, and then also gives true damage. I think it's like does a little bit too much right now. I was talking about it when I did the Soul Fighter video yesterday, but it seems really strong, and they just recently buffed it after like taking a long time trying to like figure out where they want it to land. And I kind of like, you know, I think it's really good. Like, it's hard to say. Like, it's doing numbers in PvE, so I'm curious how it's going to be when it launches, because like as a main vertical trait you don't want it to be super weak, but at the same time being really strong is going to be really annoying. But I feel like whenever you have these traits that just give a lot of stats, they're sometimes hard to land as well, right? Think about Street Demon in set 14, right? Street Demon started out as being like shit, then it got buffed and Bran was like really broken, everybody was always playing Street Demon, and then it got nerfed and it was never quite at that point again. Because it's like, it's really hard, because if you make it strong, then it's going to be really efficient, because you just get so much stats for all your units. You have front line, back line, all sorts of damage everywhere. But then if you make it really weak, then it's also a little bit weird. So I hope it lands in a good spot. But for just in general purposes of how excited I am about it, it feels very similar to like most of these type of gives all bunch of traits, right? Or all bunch of stats at least. Next we have Stance Master. Maybe a hot take. Stance Master, I think, is kind of mid. To me, it's not super exciting or crazy. Basically, you pick one of 3 stances, and this Lee Sin turns into one of 3 types of people. Either a Executioner, Juggernaut, or Duelist. But it doesn't feel that crazy, because whenever I see a Lee Sin, it kind of just feels like it's almost as if he just has 3 traits, you know what I mean? Like, I know he doesn't benefit from all 3 at the same time. You have to pick one of the 3, and it kind of changes his ability a little bit, but it's barely that noticeable, and it might just be because Executioners aren't in a crazy spot. Like I said, I still haven't seen Executioner Lee Sin. I think I have to try it out myself, because I just don't know what it does. Like, I've seen Duelist, I've seen Juggernaut, and it's just like, maybe the Executioners were the sauces, and then maybe it'll be like A tier or something. But it just feels like a general 5 cost, right? It just feels like generic. Like, yeah, this is the guy. Next we have Star Guardian. So Star Guardian, it's similar to some of the previous traits that I've seen, with the trait bonuses with the bonuses of just like playing the extra units on your board. I'm actually kind of excited to play around Star Guardian. I know that might be a little bit of a hot take, because I usually just really like these type of traits, and I like it when it's like really good vertically. So something we didn't see that often in set 14 was that like Divinicore being like a main line where you played all the Divinicores. But Star Guardian seems a lot more focused on that. I feel like the thing that's great about Star Guardian is the stats. This is what I think is really cool about it. A lot of times when you play these traits, they don't give you like nice stats, if that makes sense. Like, how do I explain it in a good way? You know, with like Divinicore, if you're playing certain units, like for example Senna and Morgana, Senna gives AD and Morgana gives AP. So a lot of times when you're playing the board for Divinicore, it never made sense to play both Senna and Morgana on a board, because like you didn't need both stats. Like Senna doesn't have AP stats, so you didn't play her, right? This is an example of like with set 14, right? If you read the abilities here, like for example, none of these units, like, you know, Jinx is AD, and like, you know, the high cap versions of the board, like playing around Seraphine, you know, she's you know, what's it called, AP, right? What's really nice here is that if you read all of these things, they all kind of fit into something that kind of builds towards Seraphine almost, right? So you get shield, ability power, like, right? So frontline, AP, you have magic damage, you have mana gen, you have heals and shields, you have healing at low health, you have attack speed, and then Seraphine gives every stats, and then emblem is increased other bonuses. They all seem more coherent with each other, right? There's not like a random gain AD, right? They all kind of like are along the same lines of playing around certain units, which in this case is usually like, you know, it kind of leans itself more like vertical Starground. You probably play like Ari into Seraphine, and then like Jinx also exists. Jinx also has AP scaling, by the way, so it's not completely useless. She gets a lot of attack speed off AP. I think Xayah also has a little bit of AP scaling. That's why I think the trait is like really nicely designed to be played vertically, where all of the bonuses kind of contribute to a lot of the units being really strong, right? Whether it be like your one cost if you start the game, your mid game playing around maybe Ari, and then your late game eventually playing around Seraphine, which is why I'm a little bit more excited to play around it. Next we have Supreme Cells. I think Supreme Cells is like alright, you know, it's like, you know, it's like it's kind of cool because one unit gets kind of upgraded and then it gets an extra execute. I'm kind of excited. I'm hoping that Supreme Cells kind of works to be like a cool thing that you can maybe flex around, similar to Mentor, but we'll see how it goes. The champ, I usually don't like these type of mechanics, so I'm gonna put it in B tier. I don't like it when like, you know, somebody could just like scam an extra life. So, you know, it is what it is. The crew, I think the crew is really cool. I haven't seen something like this. Maybe it existed before, but this is my first time at least seeing a trait where the trait scales with the star levels units. So I actually think it's really cool. I'm actually excited to try out a couple games of it. I'm sure it's not going to be super strong, but it does seem really cool. So basically, like, there's not like 1, 2, 3, 4 crew divisions. Instead, it's like based on the amount of crew units that are 3-starred, you get bonuses. And I think that's really cool. I don't know if it's completely new, but to me it's new, so I'm going to put it in S. But maybe because it's reroll, I'm going to put in A, actually. I don't think it's as cool as these two. I'm going to put in A. It's hard to say. I'm just going to put in A because I don't think it's that crazy. Wraith seems kind of run-of-the-mill to me. Just bonus damage for damage dealt, so I'm going to put in B tier. Bastion, you know, I don't really care about it. C tier. I think it's like very similar to the previous iteration of Bastion. I would have liked to be a little bit more creative maybe. Duelist just gets a bunch of attack speed. I've seen this 100 times. I'm down for B tier. Edgelord, Omnivamp and everything, very run-of-the-mill. I'm going to put in B tier as well. Executioner, same as it's always been, very run-of-the-mill. I'm going to put in B tier as well. Heavyweight. Now this one's a little bit more interesting. Like, you know, I'm not going to put it in the same tier as C, but this is like the dedicated HP trait. The reason I like this one a little bit more, I'm going to put in B tier, is because it does have a little bit of scaling on AD. So there is like a little bit of hope of making certain lines work really well, like Darius reroll, for example. Now, it's not a lot of AD, by the way. It's going to be very small, so I don't think it's that crazy. That's why it's not going to go in A tier. But I think it's at least they're trying to spice it up a little bit, so I'm going to put it in B tier. Juggernaut. This is kind of run-of-the-mill. I've seen this before. I think there's like, was it always called Vanguard? Or I don't know exactly, but I'm going to put in B tier. Same thing. B tier, not necessarily meaning that it's bad. And not necessarily meaning that it's not creative. When I say B tier, it's usually like, I'm either like apprehensive about it. So for example, like Battle Academia, or it's like something that's very standard. It's like the TFT Classic, which a set usually composes of a lot of things that are like, you know, set classics, because if you make things like completely crazy and new with no way of knowing how to play them, then it makes it a little bit more cumbersome and kind of like often translates to things being a little bit awkward and the set being a little bit more difficult. A lot of these are like, you know, the run of the mills, like these are the classics is what I would say, and then these ones are the spicy ones that I think are a little bit cooler. Prodigy, very similar to stuff before, like I said, run of the mill. Protector, very similar. A lot of these are gonna end up here, by the way. It is what it is. Sniper, I think, is here as well. Sniper existed a lot. I've seen this before, very similar to what I've seen. Sorcerer, however, I think Sorcerer, they spiced it up, right? There's always like the dedicated AP line that's kind of like is what it is. Sorcerer this time around, you do a percentage of the max HP of the unit that you killed to another enemy. So there's a little bit of like a chain damaging effect, which is actually pretty cool, especially if you like tank bust. So it could actually make like some matchup dependencies, right? Imagine if you're going into like heavyweights, for example. I actually think it's a cool spiciness to it. I think that makes me, at least me, I'm kind of excited to play around it. Ahri also does like AoE damage, kind of like if she kills a unit, she does like overkill to like other enemies and stuff. So I feel like there's like this crazy synergies that you can get going, so long as it gets like strong enough where like the AP threshold is massive, where you're like actually doing like huge burst damage. Because obviously like these type of vertical trades where you rely so much on just getting one stat that's very greedy, you need to be at a point where you're just like eliminating units like that, right? If you're not, then it kind of just falls and it just kind of feels clunky and it feels like kind of useless, because it's like you know, I'm sacrificing a lot here, right? If you're playing Sorks, you're usually not having a good front line. You need to have like, you know, that explosive damage, and I think that when those lines are really strong, it's a lot more fun, because it's nice to have comps that do burst, and then comps like you know, like there's different styles of comps, right? Ones that do insane heavy burst damage instantly, ones that try and tank and like scale and go really slow. And I think when you have these burst heavy comps, it's exciting, and they're not as often played, because a lot of times the consistent comps are the ones that are very like, you know, reliably tanky. You don't have like these huge swings that can happen very easily if things are not threaded the needle properly. So like I like having these in the meta because I feel like it spices things up as well. And then Strategist, I'm always a Strategist fan. Maybe this time around Strategist will be good. I'm going to put an A tier. I like that it gives a shield, right? They changed it at least. It's similar to like set 9 Strategist, so that's cool. You get a bunch of shielding and a bunch of damage amp if you're in the back line. I'm alright with that. Also, I might move one of these down, by the way. I think these ones I'll move down. Like the main tank traits, I think that they're just the same as they were, so I'm going to move them down to C tier. They should have been in C tier, the same with Bastion. Sorry if that was a little bit confusing. I was just kind of going faster in that part. But this is my tier list, right? The ones I'm most excited for definitely are these two. These are the ones I'm definitely looking forward to playing, so definitely A tier. And then the rest, kind of like in that run-of-the-mill, kind of like normal style of gameplay. You should recognize them, have an idea of how to play around them, use that transferable knowledge, get your good head start running with set 15, and have a great time. But either way, I'm just generally pretty excited about the set. I think that there is, like, you know, I think there's like a flavor with some of the augments and some of the traits and some of the units where there's like a little bit more of like a mildness to them. Like I found that a lot with the 5 costs at least. Which you have to understand, there's also the main set mechanic, which is giving the fruit anomalies to all of the units. So I'm actually not super, like, you know, I don't think it'll be a boring set by any means. I think a lot of people are concerned with that. I definitely think it's going to be, like, crazy, and there's going to be some crazy stuff going on in the set. So, you know, just stay tuned. Tomorrow we're probably going to go over some of the item changes, by the way, as like an introductory video. Not like the full-fledged, like these are the proper items guide, but just talk about some of the item changes that are coming and some of the role changes that are coming, just to give you guys a little bit of a head start, so you guys know what's going on with, like, you know, mana gen and stuff like that, and which mana gen items to use, etc. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and see ya, bye-bye.